children's services are funded by the taxpayer through council tax for local taxation and through national grants from the government. And this goes into a pot which is then assigned based on the number of children in need in the city, and the money's attached to the child. The new Labour government have been in power for a year now, and they have really picked up that there was always, because Birmingham's children's services have been in a particularly bad state for a long time. Since 2009 they've been rated as inadequate by the government, and there was almost a cross-party consensus that they would work together and they would cooperate, do what they could to get the children's services improved. That followed a long period where children in care were being neglected and social workers were not picking it up, and so the new Labour administration, there hasn't been a massive change. In fact, there's been a period of change going on for about 5 years, and this has seemed to have just continued rather than there's almost a continuity of policy and the programme. And during that time, there's been changes in politicians, in officers, 3 strategic directors in that time, but the process of getting it from failing to an adequate or a good service has continued. So there hasn't been a massive step change this year. There seems to be a certain continuity there as well. The first few rounds of cuts came under the Conservative administration, and they were applied on the back offices, that they always say, merging management, cutting things that could easily be cut. The odd building was closed and staff moved to other buildings. It was very much bits and pieces here and there, no major services closed. There was talk of closing youth services and cutting taxis and transport for disabled children to schools, but this was always put off. Then the Labour group came in and they've had to make cuts of a similar scale, but obviously they've come after the previous cuts, so they've had to look at more substantial changes. But again, it's difficult to see where they are. The management class has been shrunk again, so staff numbers have been reduced. Children's centres aren't being closed, but they're being changed so they don't do as much as they used to. But the warning, and we've lost 5 children's homes this year, but the theory is anyway that children's homes aren't necessarily the best place for vulnerable children to live. They're better off living with their family, and that also works out less expensive. So again, this year's budget has seen this piecemeal shaving of facilities and shaving of services rather than all-out closure. There are still big question marks over what's going to happen to youth centres for the 16 to 19-year-olds. A lot of that, they're expecting schools to pick up money there, pick up the funding there. There are question marks over children's centres, just how they're going to administer 5 million or so worth of cuts, because they were already pretty close to the bone. So we're waiting to see exactly how it works out on the ground. But in theory, it's just been more of the same so far. I gather my sense is that the Labour administration would like to reduce a lot of services to the wealthier parts of the city and concentrate them on the areas with the highest deprivation, highest levels of child poverty, and highest number of children in care cases. So I think that's where they would want to go. So areas like Sutton Coldfield, which is a relatively better off area of Birmingham, it has a relatively small caseload, so I could see services perhaps being withdrawn from there. It's also politically sensitive because Sutton Coldfield tends to be conservative, whereas inner city Birmingham, where many of the social problems are, is Labour. So they may not see a political fallout from doing that, and there's always a political consideration in some of these things. Perhaps the other area was a lot of services to schools that are now being rolled back. The school transport is one. Disabled and children with special needs were often given taxis or paid for to take them to school in a secure way, and a lot of that transport is being reconsidered into car shares and so on. So we may see something there, but again it's not been implemented till September, and that's when the phone will start ringing with people saying, I've got a problem. Behind this, the council is now, the biggest thing in local government at the moment is looking at what they call partner working. For some reason, and for many years, the council, the hospitals and health services, the police, and even the job centres, they didn't really talk to each other. There was a lot of people had things on file, but they would never share and they would never work together, and they would often do the same thing twice. And the government's now encouraging, as a result of austerity, what they call partnership working. So not only do they share, perhaps maybe share buildings and share offices and share something like HR or other functions, they're also looking to work closer together on services. The council and health service are working closer together than ever before, and in Birmingham we have the benefit of the council leader, Albert Bohr, is also chairman of the biggest hospital, so there's already a close partnership working there. And one of the biggest problems when we came to the serious case reviews when children died in care in Birmingham in 2007, 2008 and those over that period, was that often the police knew something, the health service knew something, and the council knew something, and the schools knew something, but nobody actually put it all together. And one of the big focuses has been on that closer working. So that's where they're looking to make the savings and progress the austerities is to basically see where they can combine and save money that way. A big thing that happened recently was the Bishop of Birmingham set up something called Social Inclusion Project. He called it Giving Hope and Changing Lives, and that was where they got all these different agencies as well as charities and community groups, residents associations, churches, mosques, and all those groups together to say, we've got problems in Birmingham, how can we deal with it and how can we get on? And that seems to be looking very carefully at creation of jobs, training, transport. Transport was a massive barrier to people getting around the city and getting on in life. So again, it's very early. It was only published two months ago, so we're waiting to see how that's going to pan out. But there's some promise there.